I do not believe the issue of WMD was the sole reason to go to war. It was that strategic dimension. Without doubt, the ideological mood in Washington was of that way.
So would the war have happened anyway?
I believe that the United States were determined to deal with the Saddam Hussein regime.
Finally, there was to be one last piece of intelligence that could have stopped the war. Incredibly, the source was Iraq's head of intelligence, Tahir Habush al-Tikriti, the jack of diamonds on America's notorious deck of cards. 3 months before the war, an MI6 officer met Habush in Jordan. We understand that Habush told MI6 that Saddam had no active WMD, the same message as that conveyed by the Iraqi foreign minister only days before the British dossier was published. But it wasn't what London or Washington wanted to hear.
Habush and the others, they dismissed them, apparently, out of hand because they thought it was propaganda or whatever. It didn't fit the mold. Whereas Kirkpaul, because it did fit exactly into the story, they accepted without any validation at all.
Did you get information about the meeting between the MI6, Secret Intelligence Service, and Habush in Jordan? Was that part of the paperwork that you got from SIS?
We discovered it was part of the paperwork that we got.
You say you discovered after the event?
After the event, yeah.
Why wasn't it discovered when you and your colleagues and staff went through all the documentation you got from SIS?
Well, I can't explain that. This was something which I think our review did miss. But when we asked about it, we were told that it wasn't a very significant fact because SIS discounted it as something designed by Saddam to mislead.
What's more, Lord Butler's inquiry never even knew about the Iraqi foreign minister, the man in the new suit. Were you aware that the CIA had recruited as a source Iraq's foreign minister?
No.
One would have thought that you would have been informed of that.
Well, if SIS was aware of it, we should have been informed.
It's possible that if MI6 and the CIA had been able to convince Blair and Bush of the validity of the intelligence they were getting from their two most highly placed sources, Iraq's foreign minister and Iraq's head of intelligence, then Britain and America might not have gone to war. But by this time, the die had probably been cast. The month before the invasion, despite the growing doubts, Curveball was about to be revealed to the world. The US Secretary of State, Colin Powell, prepared to make a landmark speech to the United Nations. Tyler Drumheller says he was sent the draft for vetting.
There was a whole bunch of stuff on Curveball in there. I called my immediate boss, the Deputy Director of Operations, and he said, well, you better check this with John McLaughlin, who was the Deputy Director of the agency at the time. And I said, look, there's a problem with this. We shouldn't use this. And I said, there's paragraphs of this from Curveball all through this speech.
Mr. McLaughlin, again, like Mr. Tennant, says he's got no recollection of you telling him this.
I know. Well,
it didn't happen.
It did. So.
Well, somebody's not telling the truth, are they? Either...
I'm telling the truth.
The night before the speech, Colin Powell and George Tenet were closeted in a hotel room in New York with their top aides.
I sat with Director Tenet. My recollection is until about 2 a.m. or later. The atmosphere was serious. We knew this was profound, and we also knew we had to get it not just right, but perfect.
Did Colin Powell question the intelligence that he was being given on WMD before he made his presentation?
The Secretary of State not only questioned the intelligence, he questioned it intensely. He was personally involved. He understood the significance of this.
I was home. My daughter answered the phone, and she said, "Oh, Dad, it's Mr. Tennant." And so I got on. It was George. They was calling from the UN. He said, "Well, we're really tired. We've been up for 72 hours." He wanted to get the telephone number for someone in SIS. And before we hung up, I said, "Boss," I said, "that German reporting, we X'd it out of the report." I said, "Make sure they don't use that." I said, "There's a lot of problems with that German reporting." And he said, yeah, don't worry about it. We got it all under control." And
George Tennant says he has no recollection of your saying that to him.
yeah, I do. I mean, you'll have one of us is not telling the whole truth, so I'm quite comfortable with what I have to say.
Every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence. I will cite some
Ironically, the person presiding over the UN session was Joschka Fischer, the German foreign minister. He knew there was a big question mark hanging over Curveball.
Colin Powell said these are facts. And we knew that the real fact is that neither Colin Powell nor we could prove that these are facts. It might be true, it might not be true.
The source was an eyewitness, an Iraqi chemical engineer who supervised one of these facilities. He actually was present during biological agent production runs.
Colin Powell said that he, that's you, the source, was present during the biological production runs. Were you present then?
No. He was also at the site when an accident occurred in 1998. 12 technicians died from exposure to biological agents.
Were you present on site?
No.
When an accident occurred?
No.
We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails.
You say you provided diagrams
Yes.
of the mobile biological trucks.
Yes.
You were making that up.
Yes.
And also, you made a model, you constructed a model
Yes.
of these trucks. Again, you made that up.
We have diagrammed what our sources report.
Turned on the TV in my office, and he's going through, and as he's going through, it's the curveball stuff. I said, "Wait a second."
Not just going through the curveball stuff. He's got graphics.
He's got pictures
of
and
mobile
yes.
trailers with biological.
And giving the impression that this was somehow drawn from things that Curveball said.
None of it was true. All of it was lies.
Yes.
His eyewitness account of these mobile production facilities has been corroborated by other sources. An Iraqi major who defected confirmed that Iraq has mobile biological research laboratories.
That was the second spy who fooled the world, Major Mohammed Harith.
7.
But, inexplicably, no one had told Colin Powell that Harith had been formally dismissed as a fabricator 9 months before.
It was Curveball. That's it. The Iraq war was based on lies.
Gradually, the lies were revealed. 3 days after Colin Powell's presentation, UN inspectors, now finally back in Iraq, visited the site where Curveball said he'd seen the mobile biological laboratories. What did you find?
A lot of seed, a lot of corn, a lot of nothing.
We have first-hand descriptions of biological weapons factories on wheels and on rails.
The building was dusty, extremely dusty. And there were some old hulks of equipment that I didn't recognize. That I don't think any of them ever could be used for biological production.
And the 6-foot wall that blocked the entrance to the warehouse was still there.
I don't know when the last time a human was in that building, but I was the first in a long time. This was clearly not in use for a long time, and clearly not a biological weapons production facility. So at that point, I was very disappointed.
As doubts were growing about the strength of the intelligence case, 1 million demonstrators marched through London to express their opposition to the imminent invasion. Tony Blair remained adamant.
This is not the time to falter. This is the time for this House, not just this government or indeed this Prime Minister, but for this House to give a lead, to show that we will stand up for what we know to be right.
The following night, the war began. In a matter of weeks, Saddam's regime was toppled. After the war was over and the fall of Saddam, MI6 and the CIA traversed the Middle East, hoping to track down their precious agents. They hoped to confirm that they were reliable sources and find out where the elusive WMD were hidden. There were no WMD and no substance to the corroborating sources on which MI6 had relied. The two key pieces of last-minute intelligence that the MI6 chief had personally conveyed to Tony Blair were withdrawn. The new source on trial was deemed to be unreliable. Red River was given a lie detector test and failed. And what's more, the controversial 45-minute claim was withdrawn. There was even one report that MI6 traced a source back to a small Jordanian town. He was a taxi driver who said he'd overheard Iraqi generals talking about WMD in the back of his cab. It seemed to epitomize how flaky so much of the intelligence was. It was a year after the invasion before the CIA finally got to meet Curveball. An MI6 officer was present too. Curveball was shown a satellite photo of the site where he'd worked. It bore no relation to how he'd described it.
Curveball said, well, that's been doctored. And he said, no, it hasn't. It hasn't been doctored. And he said, Curveball said, I think I've said everything I'm going to say. And then he just stopped talking. And then Curveball said to the Germans as he was leaving, I told you this was a mistake. That was the last thing he said to him.
And so what was the view of the CIA officer who
He
did the
called
final
me on
interview?
the phone. He called me on the secure phone right away and said, he said, this guy, he just admitted, he said he's fabricated. He said, I believe this is all made up.
The CIA officially declared Curveball a fabricator. A week later, its director, George Tenet, resigned.
Because of you, our nation is more secure. Because of you, the tyrant has fallen and Iraq is free.
President Bush has said that the biggest regret of his presidency was the intelligence failure in Iraq. Ideological pressure from factions in the Bush administration had pushed the intelligence to the limit and beyond.
The term cherry-picked has been the most consistent term. There was a consistent effort to find intelligence that supported preconceived positions. Very bad intelligence got to the leadership very quickly, but very other intelligence just didn't make it, just didn't get anywhere.
When people look back on this time and look back on this conflict, I honestly believe they will see this as one of the defining moments of our century.
That's great, thank you, sir. The real one.
Tony Blair has offered his deep regrets for the casualties the war caused. More than 4,000 British and American soldiers died, and around 100,000 Iraqis. But Tony Blair has never apologized for the war itself. We requested an interview with Mr. Blair, but were told that he was too busy.
There were ways in which people were misled or misled themselves at all stages. However, I do believe that these were, as it were, honest mistakes, where not only the British intelligence community, but intelligence communities all over the world brought themselves to a conclusion that turned out to be false.
But the body that probably feels most misled of all is the British public.
Yes, I think they've got every reason to think that.
10 years on from the invasion